Oh, hi, Mark. Alex Stogren, better known online as Vishera, is a mod maker for Super Smash Bros. So, what kind of mods does he make? Well...
3, 2, 1, go!
Yeah. Vishera's mods are mostly a collection of one or a couple of simple changes to a character that in turn make that character seriously overpowered or otherwise just funny for the memes. To give an example, if you aren't familiar with Vishera, you're at least probably familiar with one of his more popular mods. Back in the Smash 4 era, Vishera released a mod called Rosalina and Ganondorf. Essentially, it replaced Luma with a floating Ganondorf that kept Luma's general behavior, but with Ganon's stats and power and moveset, with some other small adjustments to make it feel better. This mod became popular enough that you've probably seen some videos of popular Smash YouTubers play with it, including Alpharad. Since it was such a big hit, sometime after Ultimate was released, Vishera remade the mod for that game as well. One of the more humorous parts of that mod is how such an easy-to-explain change to a character suddenly turns that character into one of the most broken characters ever, probably deserving of a tier all to itself on a tier list. As a matter of fact, most of Vishera's mods are like that. The characters are funny, but also broken enough that they would skyrocket past S tier if they were to be included in a tier list. But what if instead of comparing Vishera's modded characters against the Smash roster, we instead compare them with each other? Now what tiers would they fall into? To answer this question that probably nobody has ever asked, I called up my good friend Jason, the Typhlosion Gamer, and together we went through the list of all of Vishera's character mods for Ultimate and ranked them based on their overall viability in a hypothetical Smash game consisting of exclusively those modded characters. By the end of the session, we had ranked 51 character mods into 7 different tiers, and in this video, we will be going over the results and explaining them. But first, some ground rules. Number 1, we only included character mods for Ultimate. We know there were more mods made for Smash 4, but that's outside the scope of this project. Number 2, we only included mods that were character specific, nothing that applies to the whole roster, such as every character being able to charge their smash attacks for as long as they want, or every character having the same taunt animations, or whatever. Number 3, we didn't include characters that were only changed by Turbo Mode. Turbo Mode is when a character has no startup lag or ending lag and can basically spam all their moves at hyperfast speeds. While these are fun, there's simply too many of them. In fact, I believe Vishera is either making one for every character or has already made one for every character. He's already hosting CPU tournaments with them as well. Still, it'd be too much work to include multiple slots for characters that are only changed by now suddenly having Turbo Mode with no other changes. Number 4, tiers are determined by overall viability, not necessarily how they stack up against each other. While hypothetically some of Vishera's characters would hard counter each other in a matchup, we won't be considering things like that. Smash games typically have their tier lists consider overall matchups across the roster, such as Brawl having the entire meta center around Meta Knight, but we won't be doing that for this project. We are still comparing these mods with each other, but not necessarily against each other, if that makes any sense. Number 5, this is probably seen as obligatory for videos like this, but this tier list is not factual and can vary depending on your own personal opinions. This was made especially obvious for me and Jason when we had finished going through the videos and found out that we actually seemed to disagree on quite a few specific mods, but we tended to agree on the placement for most of them, so that's probably a good sign that we're doing something right here, but feel free to leave your additional thoughts in the comments below. We'll be going through the tiers one at a time, starting with the worst and making our way up towards the best. I'll include the name of the video that Vishera used to showcase each mod, as well as my own nicknames for the ones that are too much of a mouthful. So without further ado, let's begin. Starting us off, as arguably the weakest character mod on this list, we have Cloud, but with infinite limit. On the surface, this mod sounds absolutely broken. After all, we're putting the word infinite in front of Cloud's entire gimmick as a character, so this must be good, right? Well, the infinite probably doesn't mean what you think it means. Actually, as you can probably tell by the video footage, the infinite means that limit takes infinite time to charge. The point of this mod was probably to poke fun at how hilarious Cloud is, just standing there menacingly while the opponent just watches in confusion, but in doing so, Vishera also made the only ultimate character mod we found that actually nerfs a base character rather than buffs them. For that reason, this Cloud gets a tier all to himself. I call this tier Nerf tier to make it self-explanatory, but Jason had another idea, and I'm afraid that Jason might get vastly upset at me if I don't mention that he wants to call it, and I quote, "Congratulations, you're bad now." So, Cloud, congratulations, you're bad now. Let's begin with the bottom tier characters. This Ganondorf has a Warlock Punch that does 666% damage, practically guaranteeing a one-shot kill. However, it does nothing to make it any easier to hit, and does nothing else to improve Ganon's overall poor performance as a character. Warlock Punch is already strong enough that it'll deal massive damage to anyone it doesn't KO, so this mod doesn't actually add much more to Ganon's performance except make him a bit funnier. Yet another Ganondorf mod here, and this one also doesn't bring too much to the table. This Ganondorf has Lucario's Aura, which will make him deal absolutely incredible damage when at very high percent. But before then, the difference is arguably negligible. Ganon is already a very heavy hitter, so anything that doesn't increase his damage output tenfold can usually go unnoticed unless it's accompanied by other aspects that fix Ganon's weaknesses. This mod doesn't do that, but at least this aura is more powerful than base Lucario's, since it has no cap on how much additional damage it can do depending on your own percentage. Still though, you'll probably never even get to that point in a real match. This mod is hilarious. It replaces all of Little Mac's aerial attacks with better alternatives, allowing him to actually stand a chance in the air, fixing one of his most crippling weaknesses. However, his other weakness of being unable to recover still remains, and even though these aerial attacks are way better than what Mac has by default, they're still not any more impressive than an average fighter on the base roster. This Lucario's aura is uncapped. What that means is that it's no longer restricted to max damage at 300%, and instead continues until the counter hits the maximum. Since Lucario's aura also accounts for how many stocks the opponent leads by, the effects of an uncapped aura can reasonably be seen under the right conditions, and Lucario benefits from it much more than Ganondorf does, hence why this Lucario places higher than him. Still not very useful overall though, as in order to see those insane numbers, you still need to basically wait until around 999%, which is probably not going to happen. In this mod, the 3 Pokemon controlled by the Pokemon Trainer now have an ability from their origin games, and it acts essentially the same way as Lucario's aura. So you can basically see this mod as if Pokemon Trainer had Lucario's aura, but with a different name and much more detail than just slapping a new gimmick onto them and calling it a day. This mod is top tier in terms of creativity, but in practical use, the abilities don't seem to be all that impressive for far too long. Once again, to bring out this mod's true potential, you basically need to be on the brink of losing a stock. But if and when you get to that point, the results are catastrophic. This mod was almost disqualified because of how close it is to Turbo Mode, but we kept it in anyways because it still keeps the startup lag. This DK functions the same as normal, except he has no end lag on any of his moves. While watching this video, I noticed how seemingly small of a difference this makes. He has more combo potential now, which is scary, but otherwise there isn't much else going on for this DK. To round off our bottom tier characters, we have a Game & Watch whose Oil Panic move is not capped at any particular damage point. Unlike some of the other mods listed so far, you are much more likely to see the results of this mod and its catastrophic damage so long as you have the right circumstances. It's still not a lot though, as you're reliant on your opponent being dumb enough to just willingly feed you 3 insanely powerful projectiles without much thought. So in other words, just go online and find a Samus main or 2 and you should be all set. Now we can move on from bottom tier and into low tier. To start things off, we have an Incineroar whose revenge move isn't capped. To figure out how good this is, I asked Jason how often he sees an Incineroar get revenge, and his reply was way too often. On top of that, it's fairly easy for Incineroar's revenge to hit its cap in the base game, So to have that cap removed allows for some very quick ways to get some very good damage right off the bat. Unfortunately, this is still low tier because of how equally easy it is for Incineroar to then lose all that stored damage before he can unleash it. This Ganondorf is as fast as Sonic is, including in the air. This fixes two of Ganon's most critical flaws, his run speed and his recovery. With both of these fixed, Ganondorf is no longer a bad character to play, and you can start to wreak havoc. His combo game slightly improves because of this as well. I don't have too much else to say about this mod other than that though. It's good, impressive even, but nowhere near as good as the monsters later on in this tier list. This Kirby has Jigglypuff's airspeed, which makes him so much more powerful in the air than Sonicdorf could ever be with his speed. The difference is that Kirby is just an overall better character, and one that receives a much more noticeable boost by changing the airspeed like this. Kirby's already fairly good combo game now becomes absolutely busted, and Kerbo's already wonderful recovery now becomes pretty much impossible to overcome by anyone who isn't Snake or Banjo with their infinite recoveries. Simply put, this mod makes a bigger impact than Sonicdorf, but Sonicdorf is definitely the funnier and more awesome one. I hope you're keeping track of how many Ganondorf mods there are, because here's another one. This Ganondorf is completely unchanged in his moveset, power, speeds, etc. But the hitboxes on all of his moves now send fighters in random directions. The damage output remains the same, but the angle at which you fly away is entirely determined by RNG, and the results are hilarious. Every single move has the potential to be a meteor smash now, with even something as simple as the jab being capable of sending you too far below the stage to recover. It's hard to rank characters so heavily dependent on RNG like this, but something I noticed is that with this mod, Ganon actually gets a much better combo game with average RNG. As long as you're quick enough to react, it's not hard to get a true combo that can end up with over 100% inflicted, so long as you're lucky enough. This DDD has Turbo Mode activated alongside his airspeed being multiplied by 10, which unlocks a very scary thought. What if King DDD had a good combo game? The answer is this mod. It's about as disastrous as you might think. I hope you enjoy hammers because you're about to receive a clobbering when you face against whatever this beast is. Here's another Ganondorf mod. This one gives Ganon Turbo Mode alongside Captain Falcon's move speed. While he's not as fast as Sonicdorf is, the added Turbo Mode makes this Ganondorf completely without any weaknesses whatsoever. Everything that could be considered bad about Ganon in the base game is now completely fixed with this mod, unless you count his big hitbox, which, sure. But otherwise, this Ganon can do everything now, and the fact that I still consider this low tier should scare you as to what the next tiers hold. The ink you get from this Inkling's attacks do not fade away. Well, the graphics are gone for whatever reason, but the ink is still there, and it will continue to stack without any limits. It will not take long before every single hit from practically anything in the game will begin to do absurd damage. If you're careless enough to get hit by just a few extra hits from this Inkling, you're just screwed. Best to fast fall into the blast zone at that point. Oh, and from what I can tell, Inkling doesn't need to recharge with this mod either, just to make matters that much worse. This is still low tier though, because Inkling still needs to put in a bit of effort to actually get to that point, but it's not very much effort to begin with. Here's another Incineroar Revenge mod. The last one got rid of the damage cap, but this one multiplies the damage dealt by 10. Using Revenge on even a single jab will then give you hundreds of points of damage ready to be dealt to whoever is unfortunate enough to run into your next attack. You still need to put in the effort to actually get Revenge, as well as not to lose it immediately, and a hit at 0% doesn't seem to cause all that much knockback despite the high damage output. But the relative ease for obtaining these absurd numbers is probably enough to keep you entertained for a long time. Another Ganondorf mod, but I love the creativity with this one, mostly because of the name. That is a top tier name, considering the reference it's making. Anyways, this Ganondorf has all of his leg-based attacks stretched out to a ridiculous distance. At this point, if you just spam a few up airs or down tilts, you basically have everything you need. A Ganondorf with Min-Min's range is a force to be reckoned with. This mod still ends up in low tier though, but at this point you already know it's not because it's bad, it's because all the others are good. This mod is a special case though, because there's actually another mod further down the list that is basically an extension of Legs but better, and as such it simply makes no sense to place this mod any higher. The last mod in low tier, this mod gives both of the Ice Climbers their very own Buster Sword, that they probably obtained by freezing Cloud to death. With these new Buster Swords, the Ice Climbers have increased range, power, and a few moves from Cloud's moveset as well. This obviously adds a bunch of potential to what the Ice Climbers are capable of, but also gets rid of a bit of their combo game. Essentially, you have a new set of strengths and weaknesses, and Buster Climbers ends up being one of the more unique mods here. And they're good, really good. Forward Smash alone is all you really need with this duo if you want a quick kill. The aerials are a totally different story though. But without some of Cloud's other attributes, such as his special attacks, his speed, or even Limit Break, the Buster Climbers remain good, but not good enough to make it any higher than this. Oh, and I still prefer the idea of Ike Climbers, where you just replace both of them with a clone of Ike. That stuff is hilarious. Starting off mid-tier, we have a Little Mac with Turbo Mode, a smaller hurt box, and increased overall mobility, especially in the air. The Turbo Mode is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, allowing for Mac to just spam Neutral B for an instantaneous straight lunge at full charge, which is obviously busted. But overall, this Little Mac has none of his weaknesses anymore, and has become far above average in practically every aspect, except maybe defense and weight. We're at the point now where it's basically incontestable that every character after this point would fall in a tier of their own if they were ever included in the base game. This Ganondorf has a fan for a head, drastically improved mobility, as well as multiple mid-air jumps. Turbo Falcondorf and Sonic Dwarf are not as fast as this Ganondorf is, and Turbo Falcondorf's combo game isn't as good either. Ganondorf basically outclasses all of them, even without Turbo Mode. He doesn't really need it either, since his aerials are fast enough already that the superpowered air mobility is probably the most impactful thing here. Also, he has a fan for a head. Did I mention he has a fan for a head? I freaking love that. It's Ganondorf again, but this time the moves are faster. It's not quite Turbo Mode, but from what I can tell, I'm pretty sure all the end lag is gone. Marginally better than the original Ganondorf. Sweet. Every single hit that this Marth lands is a tipper. With Marth's generally quick moves and good mobility, combining it with the high damage output makes Marth a bit of a monster. This Marth is capable of getting KOs way too early, and all he needs to do is just gently poke you and it'll be as strong as a full thrust from Defalchion. By far one of the coolest things Marth can do at this point is use down air. The spike hitbox encompasses the entire attack now. No need for any specific spacing or anything. Marth will just kill whoever gets in his way. This hero has Lucario's aura and benefits very greatly from it. After a pretty reasonable point, he's already doing damage comparable to the Marth mod we saw earlier, but with a more fleshed out moveset and the almighty spell menu. Hero has access to a few one-hit KO moves pretty quickly as well, usually the critical hits, Kamikaze, Magic Burst, the usual, and while none of these are reliable, as is the case especially with Magic Burst for anyone who's seen our gameplay montages, the fact that Hero still has these at any time makes him very scary. Hero is probably the best character that Vishera could have given the aura to. This Samus doesn't need to wait for Charge Shot to become fully charged. She just gets it immediately. Unrestricted access to one of the most powerful projectiles in Smash. I don't think there's much more I need to say here other than if you're a Samus main and you love to sit in one corner and camp, this is the perfect mod for you. This Ganondorf has a 50% chance to land a devastating critical hit on any of his moves. When he does, plenty of his moves have the potential to become one-hit KOs. No other aspect of Ganondorf has changed here, so it's still possible to outplay him and exploit his natural weaknesses. But if he lands just 1 or 2 hits on you, if the tides weren't in his favor already, they certainly will be now. And while you may find it easy to avoid Ganondorf's moves because of how slow he is, you may find that a strategy that involves you not getting hit at all is surprisingly very, very difficult, even against Ganon. This Ganondorf has access to what some consider to be the best single move in all of Smash, the Monado Arts. With just a simple taunt, you can now change any attribute of your choosing into something heavily unbalanced. This Ganon is whatever you want him to be, whenever you want him to be it. Good at combos, good at recovery, good at taking hits, you name it. This Ganon has it all. Similar with how Incineroar became better when his revenge was multiplied by 10, this Lucario does the same thing with his aura. While you usually see a new aura rate threshold at around 65%, this mod divides that by 10. Now, even weaker hits will be enough to advance Lucario into the next aura threshold. And, as you can probably guess, the cap for how high this rate can go is removed. Simply take a few hits and dish out however much pain you want. At max percent, the aura spheres also become the size of planets, perfect for getting the stains off your counter, as well as vaporize the counter, and your entire house in the process. Perhaps one of the memeiest characters Vishera has ever made, this DK expands. That's it, that's the description. All of his moves stretch out to unreasonable distances and take their hitboxes with them. Simply put, you cannot approach this DK. The best you can hope for is attacking him from a distance with projectiles, and even that's going to stop working eventually. Even the spike hitboxes get stretched as well, so you can just stomp your opponent from halfway across the screen, vertically and horizontally. Yeah, they stand no chance here. The final character in mid-tier is Expandendorf, a Ganondorf that has the same abilities as the DK from just before. This is basically the Legs mod, but better in every way. On top of that, a Ganon with increased hitboxes is better than a DK with increased hitboxes, and is mostly due to that darn sword covering the entire stage. I bet a skilled Expandendorf can win nearly every match with just a couple of well-timed Dorias and up smashes. That's just about all you need, really. Welcome to High Tier, where we bring up the big guns. Starting us off is Ultra Fanendorf, yet another Fanendorf mod that takes everything from the previous two and improves upon them, then adds on top of that the ability to cancel out any move, deceptively ginormous hitboxes, and an immensely strong wind box on up tilt that basically just teleports the opponent right in front of you and keeps them there. With just a simple button combination, you get to watch your opponent become unable to do anything for about a second, and just sit and weep while you think about how to combo them to death. Your options for doing so are vast and plenty, so just go ahead and pick one at random, it'll probably do just fine. Oh, and the wind box is apparently applied to Ganon smash attacks as well. Basically, you don't miss. The game won't allow you to. Vishera's signature mod makes its appearance on this list finally. Rosalina in Ganondorf is a classic. Controlling your own puppet Ganondorf is just as fun as it sounds, and is probably one of the biggest reasons why Vishera seems to have this strange obsession with modding Ganondorf so much. So with something as clearly overpowered as this, all I can really say here is why it isn't placed any higher on the list. Again, the answer is because the other mods are just that good. But also, leaving Rosalina unchanged makes her fairly weak in the long run. And even though she can pull off some team combos with her puppet Ganondorf, she basically relies almost exclusively on Ganondorf to do everything for her. But because that's the point of this mod anyways, I can't really complain. Rosalina and Ganondorf are easy high tiers. This Isabelle has Ganondorf's sword, but also the combined movesets of whichever sword fighter gives her the best move for any particular scenario. The highlight of this mod is Isabelle's ability to Doria, which is just funny to say out loud, but giving Isabelle this much power makes her dangerous to even look at. She has tippers, critical hits, shield breaking moves, spikes, a good combo game. She's basically the sword fighter to end all sword fighters. Oh, and even her final smash changes to that of Roy's. Makes me wonder if her special moves also changed? Too bad Vishera didn't show them off at all, but regardless, this Isabelle is downright menacing, as if that wasn't obvious enough. In this mod, Peach and Daisy have their moveset combined with Ganondorf's. Peach and Daisy are already contenders for the best character in the base game, so giving them Ganondorf's power and some of his noteworthy moves while keeping their overall mobility allows for one of the deadliest combinations of characters possible. Also noteworthy, they retain their ability to float in midair. A Ganon downer works downright perfectly with that. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much the strategy. The video showcase has plenty of KOs that result from a downer spike, so there's a good chance that Vishera already knows that this combination is simply too flippin' good to ignore. Oops, all up smashes. No, seriously, this Palutena forgot how to use any move except for up smash. If you recall, Palutena's up smash is basically just a huge pillar of destruction, and in this mod, that huge pillar is copy-pasted onto nearly every one of Palutena's other moves. I'm not certain, but it also looks like he maybe made the attack even larger as well. So this is good for the same reason that Expand DK and Expand Endorph are good, but with the added natural mobility of not being a heavyweight fighter, as well as the added benefit of all the attacks being smash attacks, which carry over the power as well. This isn't just a hitbox extension, this is a straight up duplication, and the results are just as insane as you might think. This mod almost didn't make it into the video because technically the mod affects every character in the roster. Specifically, it gives every character Lucario's uncapped aura, as well as their taunts instantly giving them a certain amount of damage in order to reach absurdly high aura levels instantly. But I'm featuring this mod anyways because Lucario gets special treatment here. While everyone else gets aura, he gets aura twice. And from what small amounts of gameplay I was able to see of Lucario in this mod, I'm led to believe that this isn't an added aura effect, but a multiplied one. Almost as if Lucario's aura itself has aura. So all Lucario needs to do is taunt once, and then all of his attacks do many hundreds of percentage points worth of damage. All of them. The clear downside here is that once you do the taunt to get your power, all it takes for you to lose it is for you to get hit in the foot by the head of a small needle with about as much force as a housefly hitting against a living room window. So Lucario is basically a very good example of a glass cannon here, but that doesn't stop him from being one of the scariest characters we've seen so far. Too bad we only get to see him for about 10 seconds. This Meta Knight has the Masamune, Sephiroth's sword. In addition, once he gets to a high enough percentage, he also gets something very similar to the one-wing mechanic that Sephiroth has. All in all, this is a Meta Knight with the soul of Sephiroth, and all you need to do is watch him for a little bit to find out just what makes that broken. The damage the Masamune deals usually is indeed carried over into this mod, and combining it with Meta Knight's devastating combos without any sort of startup or ending lag is enough to make this one of the greatest combo characters we've seen so far. But the one-wing mechanic also makes him essentially go into turbo mode, and it vastly improves all of his moves at once. At that point, he's practically unstoppable, and he doesn't even need to be at that high of a percentage for it to even trigger. This Cloud's Buster Sword is 3 times bigger than usual with no added downsides to balance it out, essentially Cloud with Expand mode. So what makes him better than Expand DK, Expand Endorph, or even Up Smash Palutena? It's the moveset. Cloud's moveset is basically perfect for Expand mode because his hitboxes are already ridiculous. Back in Smash 4, he was a strong contender for second best character in the game behind Bayonetta, mostly because of how hard it is to avoid his attacks. Now, with them expanded to this extent, it's nearly impossible to get to him. On top of that, the extended hitboxes also apply to Finishing Touch, allowing for one of the cheesiest, easiest methods of getting a KO that you will ever experience. Remember what I said about Cloud's moveset being basically perfect for Expand mode? Scratch that, this Marth is much better at it. This Marth's Falchion is 4 times bigger than usual, and Marth's moveset combined with this extension makes it even easier to prevent opponents from approaching from any angle at any time. The tippers are also still here, so you'll have to relearn the spacing to land them consistently, but otherwise, if you want a round where you take no damage, pick this Marth and just spam your tilt attacks, and then top it off as a smash attack, and you've basically already won. The only thing that Big Buster Sword Cloud does much better than Long Falchion Marth is the ability to spike easier thanks to forward air, but otherwise, this Marth is just a better pick overall. I hesitate to call this a character mod because the showcase video is only seconds long and is clearly meant as only a brief joke rather than something to be seriously considered as a standalone character mod. But nonetheless, I think it counts. This Ganondorf's aerial side special doesn't drag opponents down to the blast zone, but up to the blast zone. It's a guaranteed KO every time, unless there's a ceiling or something preventing you from ascending. Otherwise, this is all you need to do. The biggest and most important difference this mod makes is that it doesn't KO Ganon as well. This can hardly be considered a Ganon side if there isn't even a side to it. It's just a win button. Press side B to win. Granted, you still need to put in the work to actually get to the opponent and land an aerial side B, but the reward is worth doing it 1,000 times. The reverse Ganon side is just a win button, right? Well, here's another win button. This Kirby gets bigger with every opponent that he eats with his neutral special. However, I don't consider that the most notable part of the mod. To me, the most notable part of this mod is the fact that Kirby doesn't then spit out or get a copy ability from his opponents. He just straight up eats them and they explode instantly. Another win button. Press neutral B to win. What makes this better than reverse Ganon side is the fact that this move is easier to land with an easier to use character, and there's still the small matter of Kirby becoming huge if he keeps it up for long. If you are in the extremely specific scenario of being in a match with numerous players with an insane amount of stocks, and you get to become big enough by eating them all up one at a time, the rest of your moves also become one-hit KOs because the damage output scales up with your size. Spam down smash, that'll cover the whole stage and kill everyone it touches. Granted, a scenario like this will likely never happen in practice, but if you just want to try it out by intentionally setting up the scenario, you're going to have a lot of fun. This was one of the biggest disagreements that Jason and I had on tier placements. This Shulk's Monado art abilities are multiplied by 100 times. A light tap, or even a sneeze from the Shulk in Buster or Smash mode is enough to send you into the stratosphere. This was enough to have Jason consider this Shulk to be within the top 5 characters on the list. However, I'm still a bit hesitant, because it doesn't just multiply Shulk's strengths by 100, it also multiplies his weaknesses by 100. So while one small tap is enough to send you into the stratosphere, the same applies the other way around as well. Anyone holding up a shield will also easily beat this Shulk, since the knockback you receive when breaking a shield also gets scaled. So a Shulk breaking your shield will push him backwards all the way into the blast zone. But it's not all just Buster and Smash mode. Monado Arts has 3 other modes to consider as well. In shield mode, nobody can do any damage to each other. In jump mode, gravity is so much stronger that you don't jump so much as you really just teleport really fast. In speed mode, it's far too easy to accidentally SD. But what I find hilarious is that in all modes, the Windbox Shulk generates when activating his counter also scales up and pushes your opponent into the blast zone before you can hit them. All in all, this Shulk is probably the glassiest cannon in existence. He can kill very, very, very easily, but also dies just as easily. That cannot be demonstrated more clearly than how Vishera struggles to beat simple CPU players during the showcase video. Despite all that, the sheer power of this Shulk cannot be ignored. If anyone disagrees with my placement of this Shulk here, I already understand exactly the reason why. This Shulk does more damage than anyone else on this list, including the number 1 spot, and that is worth some very serious recognition. I just think the downsides are also equally as notable. As a matter of fact, I think the downsides of the previous Shulk are so notable that I actually consider this weakened Shulk to be a better character overall, deserving of the last slot in high tier. This Shulk's Monado arts are multiplied by 10 instead of 100. This makes his damage output still quite legendary, with his weaknesses significantly less notable. You're still a very glassy cannon, and you're still going to die in just a couple hits when in any mode that reduces your defense, but your damage output is still enough to dish out as much punishment as you're receiving, and the end result is a Shulk that I think is a lot more manageable to use and less risky to use than the 100 variant. It may not be as legendary as the 100 variant, but at least it's more viable than the 100 variant. At long last, we arrive in top tier. Starting us off is one that I genuinely didn't expect to be so powerful, Ganondorf with Cloud's Limit Break. Essentially, this mod gives Ganon the limit meter that, once fully charged, allows him to use special moves that are extraordinarily more powerful and flashy than any other move we've seen on this list so far. Seriously, they look like they come straight out of Dragon Ball Z. Unfortunately, until you get limit charged up, you're just playing normal Ganondorf. However, it seems like Limit charges extremely fast in this mod, so you likely aren't stuck with normal Ganon for very long. You'll likely get plenty of opportunities to unleash these special attacks, which all just look like final smashes. Each one will likely KO your opponent immediately. So, in other words, a win button that you get multiple times over a period of time, easier to land than ever, and looks flashy as heck. That's easy top tier material. On top of that, it also looks like it brings back Ganon's down smash attack from Smash 4, but I don't know what that does to improve this particular mod other than make it look cooler. Remember all the way back in low tier, where random launch Ganon was entirely dependent on RNG? Well, this Isabelle is also dependent on RNG, but for her, there isn't really a scenario of RNG that isn't in her favor. This Isabelle spawns and throws random items when she uses the slingshot, so if she just spams it enough, the whole screen just becomes explosions. As a matter of fact, it seems like the RNG rule heavily prefers explosives anyways. I bet you're more likely to get bombs than you are to get a pitfall seed or whatever. What I found hilarious is how Electrode also appears as an item you can get from the slingshot. Overall, this slingshot roulette, as we call it, is capable of complete and total stage control, no matter what items you get, because all you need to do is spam it, and your opponent will be unable to avoid all of it. What's even better is how none of the explosions hit Isabelle herself. Jason and I thought that the X-bombs in this video were damaging her, but upon second inspection, there's just another Isabelle in the fight that spawned her own bombs. Really, this Isabelle can blow up whatever she wants, whenever she wants to, without suffering the repercussions, and you can't even stay a safe distance away from all the destruction, because there is no safe distance. Ganondorf with Limit basically gave him final smashes for special moves that he could just use anytime he had a charged meter, but this Luigi can basically use them at will. Heck, this Luigi is a final smash. For starters, his moveset is all changed. Vishera gave him an amalgamation of various other fighters' movesets in order to create this, but also, way too many of his moves are much flashier and deal much more damage, and even his actual final smash was changed. This Luigi has the perfect toolbox for a fighting game if that fighting game only included very extremely powerful mortals but not quite gods. So, Fox's laser is one of the easiest moves to spam and land, right? So, imagine if every laser shot was replaced by one of the most powerful moves in all of Smash. This Fox shoots Warlock punches out of his gun, and, well, can you figure out why that's broken? Warlock punch only needs 2 or 3 hits from 0% to be a kill move, but this Fox can spam maybe about 3 or 4 of them per second at optimal mashing speeds. Speaking of which, if you get hit by even one, he can continue spamming them, and the hit stun will keep you locked into place as you slowly reach 999%. This Fox is so powerful, you're actually likely to see the full power of some of those uncapped aura mods from way at the beginning of this list if you play them against this Fox and manage to somehow survive the initial hit that gets you to 999%, maybe by playing on a stage with the ceiling or whatever. Ridley almost didn't make it into Smash because of his size, right? Well, this is why size is such a big problem for him. We call this Ridley at normal size, though we're actually a bit uncertain about his canon size since it's always changing. We just think it's funny. Also, in the time it took for me to say that, I bet this Ridley could have been able to take a stock off of every other player in an 8-player Smash. This Ridley is so big, he covers the entire stage with just a single move. The damage output also scaled up with his size, so he basically gets to throw out Final Destination sized 1-hit KO hitboxes at will. His only weakness, as far as I can tell, is that his defense didn't scale up, making him an easy target to hit, combo, and maybe even send to the blast zone because of how bigger characters tend to hit blast zones easier, but good luck getting that far. All Ridley needs to do is whisper, and the force from it would be powerful enough to knock you into next week. This is the last Ganondorf mod on this list, and it's a big one. Every single hit Ganon lands has a 50% chance of just completely destroying you. This isn't something you could probably avoid under the right circumstances. This isn't something like getting you to a very high percentage and knocking you away. This is a straight up KO on impact, and you cannot do a thing about it. Having the fate of your entire stock be determined by a single coin flip is very unfair, obviously. And even if you do win the coin flip, Ganon could just hit you again, and you are in just as much risk as you were a second ago. Ganon landing both hits of Nair on you will statistically KO you 75% of the time. It doesn't matter how much defense you have, how resistant you are to knockback, or anything else of the sort. This Ganon contains win buttons on his entire moveset. Welcome to Melee. This fox has Shine permanently activated. On the surface, this might make it seem like it only invalidates any projectiles, but it's actually way more than that when you remember that Shine also has a hitbox, and now that hitbox is permanently active as well. Fox just needs to walk into you and you'll get knocked back. If he runs to you again, he can combo you off the stage without even throwing out a single attack. But the ease at which he can deal damage and KO isn't why he's so powerful. From what I can tell, this fox is not quite invincible, but very close. Because you can't hit him with projectiles, you need to resort to melee attacks, and any melee attack that also extends your own hurt box won't work, because Fox will be able to land a hit on you first. Your attack will then get cancelled unless you have super armor or something. I bet maybe Little Mac might stand a chance, but it's a very, very low chance. Really, you need to find a character who has an attack that isn't a projectile, but also doesn't extend your own hurt box. I'm thinking maybe Min Min. But practically everyone else doesn't stand a chance at all. Permashine Fox is top tier because of how easily he can just completely invalidate character picks. His defensive options are just that good, and it's basically just a side effect that they also serve as offensive options as well. Here's our last top tier character, a Jigglypuff with a permanent rest hitbox. This is very similar to the Fox from earlier, but with a few key differences. For starters, the rest hitbox doesn't reflect projectiles like Shine does. However, it does do astronomically more damage. We all know what rest is like. It's one of the most powerful moves of Smash, and all Jigglypuff needs to do to land it is to walk into you. Again, melee attacks are questionable at best because rest will hit you first, so why not stay back and throw projectiles? Well, there's a good chance those projectiles will end up cancelled out due to the clashing against the permanent hitbox. As a matter of fact, even your weird disjoint attacks that can break through Permashine could also clash against Rest's extraordinarily powerful hitbox and also end up doing no damage. So now we see Permarest Puff's true defensive capabilities. To deal damage to this monster, you need an attack that's much more powerful than Rest so you can break through the clash, and you need that attack to be from a safe enough distance that your hurt box doesn't extend into the Rest hitbox. Once again, this Puff isn't quite invincible, but it's pretty close. I'm not sure what other types of moves can break through Permarest, but Vishera did end up taking damage in the showcase video, so I know something can break through under special circumstances, but even in slow motion, I struggle to think of what that could be. Jason and I actually disagree over which one is more powerful, the Fox or this Puff. The truth is, they could both probably be interchangeable since they vary so differently despite their very similar concepts, so go ahead and form your own opinion about which of these is better. For now though, we end off top tier with potentially one of the scariest Puff mods I've ever seen. And before we move on to the final character on this list, in a tier of its own, I want to mention a few mods that didn't quite qualify for the list. Go ahead and call them honorable mentions if you want. Starting off, this is another mod of Buster Climbers, but with Turbo Mode. Technically, this mod doesn't exclusively improve the Ice Climbers with Turbo Mode, because the Buster Sword is still there, but it just feels too close. At least these Buster Climbers have their combo game back. If they did make it into the video, they'd probably be near the top of mid-tier. This video showcases the Marth with all tipper attacks alongside a Roy with all sweet spot attacks. I originally had them both listed separately, but then I discovered that the Marth already had a video of his own, and that this video only changes that Marth further with turbo mode, similar to the Buster Climbers. In the end, I panicked, and wanting to follow my rules, I disqualified the Roy because too many aspects pointed to me needing to just not count this video. But if this Roy was included, it would probably be in mid-tier with the Marth, but lower. I think the Marth is a strong mounted character of the two of them. Here is an expanded DK mod with turbo mode. Yet another video that didn't get included here because of how similar it is to another mod already listed, but only improved with turbo mode. Don't get me wrong, turbo mode is incredible to watch, but after a few dozen videos of it, it no longer becomes the most impressive idea to me. You're gonna have to add more than turbo mode to make something that impresses me all over again. Still though, the raw power of this DK is not something to ignore, so I'd probably put it in high tier just above the big Buster Sword Cloud and Long Falchion Marth. Too many technicalities with this mod. This is a mod for Giga Bowser, where it only adds turbo mode. This is probably my favorite turbo mode video I've ever seen, but again, there are too many technicalities with the rules I set for this list that just confused me as to whether or not to include this one. Technically, Giga Bowser both is and isn't a playable character in the base Smash game. You can play as him with mods or hacks, and he has a fully usable moveset, but you'd still need to break the game a little bit to do that. You can play as him with Bowser's Final Smash, but that's not the playability we were all thinking. If we do consider him playable, I shouldn't count this video. But if we don't consider him playable, then I don't know if I should count this video. What did I do? I panicked again and decided not to. Jason helps to convince me as well. But if Turbo Giga Bowser was listed, this is clearly and obviously a top tier character. I'm putting him just underneath normal size Ridley and just above the Warlock Punch Fox. Here's a mod that makes every character in the game randomly explode at random intervals. Now, you can probably already figure out why I didn't include this one. It directly breaks one of the rules I had set. Truth be told, I never even considered counting this mod for even a second. So why is it still here in this list of honorable mentions? Well, because Jason wanted me to. And I don't blame him. This is one of my favorite mods that Vishera has ever created, and I just find it absolutely hilarious. Seems like Jason thought the same because he practically begged me to at least mention this mod in this video. So, I did. This is the kind of silliness that I subscribe to Vishera for. I enjoy this way too much. And now, with honorable mentions aside, it's time to bring out the mod that both Jason and I instantly agreed belonged in only the very top of this list. The clear, uncontested champion of Vishera's character-specific mods for Ultimate, and the only resident of its tier, sitting very comfortably well beyond top tier, is...
3, 2, 1, go!
There isn't much question here. This DK wins it all. We didn't even find it to be that close of a competition. Behold the crowned champion of the tier list. So to start off, let's explain what you're seeing here. First of all, this DK has turbo mode, which alone would have been enough to put him in around mid-tier. Alone, it also would have disqualified him. Thankfully, it's not alone. This DK also has expand mode, which also alone would have put him in about mid-tier, very close to high tier. This combination of mods alone also would have disqualified him as well, but thankfully, they're still not alone. This DK also has infinite mid-air jumps, which I now consider to be enough to put him on the board near the top of high tier or near the bottom of top tier. And as if all that wasn't enough, the big thing that does it for me and Jason, the one thing that makes this DK so overpowered, is his ability to activate Bayonetta's Witch Time at will, by simply taunting. This freaking monkey can stop time, at will, with no repercussions. That alone would be enough to put him in around high tier or top tier, because you just can't do anything against it. DK just presses one button, and you might as well put your controller down. But combined with all these other mods, and DK becomes almost godlike. As a matter of fact, we're naming this tier God tier because of that. This DK basically has no weaknesses unless the person controlling him is dumb enough to not immediately start off by taunting and stopping time. Once Witch Time is activated, you could literally just sit there and spam buttons, and whatever combination of buttons you press has a very high likelihood of just coincidentally translating into a true combo 0 to death. The offensive power of this DK is obvious, but the defensive power of this DK is unbeatable. You can't hit him if you can't do anything, right? With just a single button press, you become basically invincible. And with just a few more, you can send your opponent into oblivion. It might not be as brainlessly easy as spamming smash attacks with normal-sized Ridley or spamming literally any other move at all with insta-kill Ganon, but when you can't get hit, and when your opponent can't do anything, you have all the time in the world to consider what method you want to use to turn your opponent into dinner. Nothing gets close. This DK wins the tier list. What's even better is that unlike some of the other top tier characters in Smash, this DK is actually really fun to watch. Something about how absolutely minuscule of a chance his opponents have is just laughably entertaining. Oh, and it's Mimi. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would enjoy it just for that alone. Regardless, this DK sits alone in God tier above everyone else, and he deserves that spot without question. And that's it. That's the tier list. Really quick though, before we end this off, I just wanted to take some time to say a few things. First of all, Jason's channel is in the description below. Go ahead and check him out. He was a great help with this list and made the whole process so much more wonderful. He brings a whole new layer of fun to everything he's involved in, and I'm so happy I get the opportunity to work with him on projects like this. Secondly, the star of the show here is none other than Vishera himself. His Twitter account and YouTube channel, as well as links to every single one of his videos featured here, are all listed in the description below. I highly recommend you follow him, subscribe to him, whatever. The work he puts into these mods for just a few extra laughs is astounding. It's also beyond funny to see him post occasional images or GIFs of his next mod on Twitter without any context. I always look forward to his next project. Oh, and Vishera, if you're watching this, as you can clearly tell, both Jason and I are big fans of your work. High quality, hilariously overpowered, and always a ton of fun. If either of us knew how to mod or switch safely, we'd probably try these out for ourselves, but we're not quite on that level yet. So for now, we just sit back and watch in awe as you continue to impress us with every new release. I'm thankful I managed to learn about you. It's been quite the ride since then, so thank you. I asked Jason if he wanted to add anything here, and he said, and I quote, "Make more funny mod, that is all." This concludes my video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.